To see who's talking on this call with your web browser, go to www.spiderphone.com. Thank you. You will now join your conference. This conference is being recorded as requested by the host.
Okay, that was just the spider phone dialing it. But converting it even further to WMV is really not usable. So basically, yeah, just to go back and recap, I saved the files in the native formats to the DVDs. You open it from a computer, you can launch any of them from a viewer. You can use the VLC viewer to view the FLV file, or you could use Windows Media Player for the WMV files.
Okay. So it sounds like moving forward, there's nothing that prevents us from sending out the DVDs to the team.
Yeah.
And then
so
it's
get jewel cases, and I can get those shipped.
Okay.
Can I ask, Mike, is the audio and the video correlated?
Meaning
so what we're looking at is also the same time that Peter was speaking?
Yeah, I think it's pretty accurate.
So there's audio-video for both days, and they're overlapped. So we play one file, and we see the computer screen, and we hear Peter talking?
No, there's two separate sets of recordings we're talking about. We did the Adobe Connect recordings, which is him talking through the webcam and doing his on-screen display. So in that, you're primarily getting his voice, and you're barely getting the background voices. The main goal for that was to get his instruction and to get the on-screen displays captured.
Right.
The second recording, as you remember, is the standalone video camera, which is a solo single shot on him, where the audio capability is a little bit better. You can pick up some of the background questions better, but it's not ideal for getting everyone's questions. For future meetings, and this is even outside of this group, if we were to do this type of format where we're doing two separate recordings, I would recommend doing external mics for the video camera. This way you get much more coverage. I mean, we don't have to get totally crazy with wireless mics or anything like that, but just a single external mic placed properly in the room, you probably can get all the questions from the audience or from the participants rather clearly. So yeah, there's two separate things to be viewing here. It's the Adobe Connect files and the video camera files.
Okay.
And the video camera files were really meant more to just capture audio. And again, in hindsight, what I probably should have done is put the camera directly facing him, so sort of like right by Brandon's desk there, because then it may have been able to capture the background audio better, or even in the row between yours and Brandon's desks and where Abby and Christina's computers are, just so that we could have captured more audio. But it's lesson learned.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it sounds like relatively soon we'll have the DVDs kind of shipped out to the team, and then I think we can continue a conversation about, trying to get the agendas and, trying to put some timestamps to it, for lack of a better term. And I think it sounds like that'll just be kind of like a Word document that, says at 22 minutes, we started talking about this.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you really want to break it down based on the agenda, that would be the easiest way, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the next item quickly I have on the list is the actual compilation of the team's written notes from the training. So as I had mentioned last time, Robin had passed along her very kind of detailed and thorough notes to me. And I believe last week I added my portions to it, things that may have been left out, and have sent that to Stacy. As Mike had mentioned, it sounds like they're pretty busy out there, so I don't know what her progress has been. I'll follow up with her offline to see if she's had a chance to do anything, but right now I know that it's in her court, and hopefully she'll be able to populate it soon and continue circulating. In terms of the next person on the list, so I think the only two people that haven't touched it yet would be Lindsay and Brandon. I can't imagine that either of you are going to be very excited to say, oh, I have a lot of free time on my hands in the coming weeks. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, if you need somebody else to look at it, I'll look at it.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to have free time, so
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter. I can take it next or I can wait until after Brandon.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't when I touch base with Stacy, I'll try and see what her timeline is, and then I can reach out to each of you to see if she says, oh, yeah, by the end of this week, see which one of you may have more time to be able to devote to it, because I don't want to strap people too much with it. So I will follow up with her offline here about it. Third item on our list here, I again wanted to do just a kind of quick update of Revit projects that we have within our offices. You'll notice that I had actually pulled the Hyundai project off the list just because I certainly will be going into more detail of that kind of later in our meeting today. But I wanted to touch base with Robin and see what updates she may have on the Google project that you're working on out there.
I have 0 updates. Revit-wise, we've actually moved backwards.
Okay.
Their Revit model has gone backwards. It has less information in it than the original model had. But everything should be picking up full speed on the 15th. The deadlines for that were pushed out a month, which, yay. So no huge news on that.
And why was it pushed out a month? Was it Revit-based, or was it because of other project type stuff?
I have no idea. They just
Fair enough.
told us that there were new days, and I wasn't going to argue.
Yeah.
There was no way we were going to meet the original deadlines. And also in this past week, we've quote-unquote converted one of our large clients that from now on all of their projects with us will be in Revit.
Okay. And was that a discussion that you had with them kind of up front and saying, we now have this capability, or were you approached by them?
That was actually follow up to the email that I sent out to everybody.
Okay.
It was that client that got prompted from a project that we're currently working on them with, but they were wishing that we could have done Revit on, and then a proposal subsequently that came out this week that we needed to do.
Interesting.
And we got on the phone with them, and that was the end result.
Gotcha.
So now I would say our 2 largest clients from here on out, all of our projects with them will be in Revit.
And being that they're 2 of your larger clients, what percentage would you say of then kind of Boston work, just from their perspective, would be Revit?
Well, for new projects, will be 100. Well,
no.
75.
I would say probably like 75% of our new projects come from these 2 clients.
Okay.
So, new work from them probably, we're looking at 75% of our work.
Okay. Wow. That certainly is significant. Well, I'm glad to hear that. They're asking the questions of us, and that I think that realistically we are well prepared to kind of go through this, and that there will be learning curves, but I'm glad that it seems to be positive discussion with them, and certainly a big chunk of the workload in Boston seems to be moving in that direction. So
we're jumping down the rabbit hole whether we like it or not.
Yeah, no, I think it'll certainly be challenging, but I imagine also exciting at the same time. So, good. Well, thank you for the update. The other project I have here on the list is another LA project that I'm working on. It's a performing arts center for the University of Chapman, which is down in Orange County, and I had a kickoff meeting a couple weeks ago for the CD phase. And we haven't started documentation. We're still kind of talking design with them. But I anticipate that we'll be kicking in with documentation here probably in about 2 weeks. And as I mentioned in our last call, I'm rather 50-50 in terms of excitement as well as terror. In regards to a performing arts center, I think that it has a lot of benefit, but I'm also a little scared in terms of how it'll all work out. So I think a lot of lessons to be learned certainly from it, I anticipate, but I guess we'll tackle those when we do. One of the things also, and I didn't include it on the list, and I'll likely touch on it for the Hyundai project, is I know that we've all talked about wanting to keep our skill set rather fresh from our training, and certainly it sounds like Boston will be able to, and will have certainly some work coming in to keep that skill set fresh. And here on my team, I certainly have a couple of projects, but I know that in speaking with Lindsay and Stacy that they currently don't have anything necessarily down the pike in regards to Revit. One of the things that I'd like us all to consider is already spoken with Lindsay about certainly helping with the Hyundai project, and one of the things that I'd like to go over later today in showing the project is actually how simple it seems to create kind of the work sharing side of things. I think that it's much more difficult for architects because they have so much going on, but for the work that we do, it seems rather straightforward where we actually can relatively easily have multiple people working on the same project at the same time. And so, one of the things that I think talked with both Stacy and Robin about offline is, seeing if perhaps there's some way to get Stacy involved with the Google project. And it's a much bigger discussion about, availability and things like that, but it would be an interesting way to keep her involved and help us all continue to learn. So that's one of the things I guess I would ask everybody to keep in their mind, is how we can keep everyone involved and try and think of those opportunities as they present themselves.
So, Michael, I just wanted to add one thing as an opportunity potentially, and this will Lindsay could actually add some insight into this as it came up in our AV3 meeting yesterday. With Clifton and certainly Barrett, who are part of that team, exploring Loom tools in the next few weeks as part of their task for the AV3 team. They're going to need to come up to speed. I know Barrett has been using Revit to a degree. Is she using it exclusively with Biogen, guys?
No, on Biogen, yeah, but that project we're done on.
Okay. Okay, so her ongoing use is going to sort of decline. She's not going to be using it regularly.
It stops.
Yeah, at the moment it stops because none of us are on Revit at the moment. But as soon as Google starts, we start documenting it, then that will pick up.
Okay. Well, as it ties into a Loom tool, since they will need to get into Revit anyway, I know Clifton on the call yesterday I got the impression, and Lindsay, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I got the impression that he was kind of very new to Revit, had never really played with it, and I think was, sort of like how a lot of you guys were leading into the training about, where do you go from here, and where are things and how do you do things. Anyway, make a long story short, I think that there are opportunities to not only refresh our own training, but to sort of conduct introductory training as far as what we want to eventually be doing by training the firm, but train some of our colleagues that are going to be using Revit for other tasks potentially, and getting them up to speed. So I know if you guys in Boston wanted to sort of sit with Barrett and sort of coach her and get her set up, using Revit so she can use the Loom tools, and then Michael or Lindsay, if you guys want to, team up with Clifton to get him acquainted, I think that might be good.
Right, and actually I spoke to Clifton after our call just to see if he was comfortable or if we were kind of just throwing him in this without giving him enough direction. And he seems to be very willing to take it on, and with me being right there, we're going to work together to get him started in Revit. We're also pretty lucky where he's very good technically, so I don't think he's going to have too much trouble with just some direction from me to get started.
Okay.
He tends to pick things up very quickly with different computer programs, so I think he'll be fine. But that does open up a good point, because it may be a good idea. It doesn't sound like Stacy has much free time, but if she wanted to invest a little time in keeping Revit skills active, she could not join the Illum Tools, like the team, the AV3 team, but she could be one of our testers for Illum Tools. I could send her the tutorial, and she could kind of join us, because right now it's just Clifton, Barrett, and myself.
Right.
It would be helpful to have someone in New York.
Well, absolutely. Since Colin left us, that would actually be very good. So, yeah, I would be more than happy to install it on her computer, and if you want to collaborate with her on that, I think that'd be great, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I think that certainly keep us updated on how that develops, the Illum tool side of things, and I think, yeah, certainly, Lindsay, if you want to reach out to Stacy and see what her interest and availability may be to help out with the Illum tools and start exploring, I think that certainly is, like you mentioned, another great opportunity to try and stay somewhat familiar with, what we had learned previously. So it's good.
Right. Okay. And then I imagine in Boston, Barrett will be talking to both Robin and Brandon as she's exploring it. So I'm sure you guys will get some exposure to it, whether you like it or not. So if you guys want to be included on that, I can send you whatever I'm sending her, or she can just share it with you as she receives it too. I don't want to overload it with too many people, but I'm assuming since you guys kind of work in such close quarters that you'll be exposed to it as she's exploring it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll keep everyone posted.
Great.
Great.
Yeah, it's nice that with Lindsay being on two different teams and Barrett being on two different teams, there's some good there's good conduit for the teams to interact with one another. Someone that is up to speed on both things, different initiatives that the teams are different teams are trying to do. So I think it works out really well.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, so the next item that I have listed is actually something that Robin briefly brought up earlier, but it's in regards to an email that she'd received from one of their clients, looks like earlier this week. And I just pulled up the email to kind of refresh everybody's memory, but as I understand it, it was certainly the architect asking, how can we be involved in terms of Revit, and what can the architect do on their end to make things even easier for us? So I guess one of the things that I wanted to ask Robin is just the follow-up conversations that you had with them, kind of what was talked about and what was formalized in regards to the relationship between ourselves and their firm.
Sure. I was trying to hold off on the conversation because I wanted to talk to you guys first, but unfortunately that didn't happen. Pretty much the conversation that we had was very cut and dry, just very factual about how we currently have things set up, that we currently have a template that lives in 2012, that we're using non-hosted fixtures versus hosted fixtures, that they're generic to reduce the file size, that we can associate IES files to them for rendering purposes, and just kind of, how we work, some of the problems that we've run into with another client, that I know that we're still exploring how to fix some of those things, such as I know both of these firms have been issuing new Revit models once a week, which a lot of the consultants have found very difficult because we just constantly feel like all we're doing is updating a model and never getting any work done. And I know the engineers were very frustrated because we would send back our model, the architect would move a ceiling, tell us, we'd move things, but the architect already got our stuff and never knew that all of these changes were happening. And they just felt constantly like they would get a model, it would take them 3 days or so to figure out what changed, incorporate everything, and then a new model came out. So it was just a constant so talking about perhaps releasing models on milestones much more compatible to kind of how CAD has been released in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Also, line weights seem to be a big issue that a lot of architects are having issues with. Having our fixtures be line weights that are compatible and that they're happy with in their model and look correct in their model versus not just look correct in our model. And also masking of fixtures, which I believe all of our fixtures have masking in it, but I believe we ran into an issue before our template that if you put a 2x4 into a ceiling, it didn't cut the ACT. So you would have...
If it was in a 2x2.
Right, if it was in 2x2 ceiling. So the ACT would just go through the center of the fixture.
Mm-hmm.
So we just discussed a lot of these issues that have come up in the past, some things that we've talked about and how to fix these, that we believe that with Revit comes added coordination, that a lot more coordination is needed and a lot more talking has to happen between all of the parties
Mm-hmm.
than
Mm-hmm.
in the past. And, are they willing to do that? Is that something, what have you? And that's kind of how the conversation left off. And then a couple hours later, Carrie told me that she received an email that they were impressed, and from now on, we're doing Revit.
Fair enough. Okay.
So that's essentially kind of how everything went down. But I do think that this architecture firm has not made the complete leap themselves. I know they have people in their firm who have never even touched Revit. And the person who sent this email is one of their Revit specialists. So the door is still very much wide open for us to have conversations with him, and while the rest of the team, their firm ramps up and makes the transition, and how best we work with them, how best they work with their consultants, how we can smooth this process out so it's, the least painful way for everybody.
Sure.
And, the most productive and efficient, of course.
So I think one of the things, how did they respond to when you had discussed kind of the scheduling and, model uploading and background releasing? How did they respond to not necessarily the pushback, but the recommendation of, look, we've been in situations where we have weekly, bi-weekly uploads, and it seems to be like the team is always chasing their tail, and there's not a coordinated design. Our recommendation is to really have milestones where things are frozen. How did they respond and kind of receive that recommendation?
This particular architect thought that it was a good idea. The other architect has started. That's the way that we're going to approach Google.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same architect as Biogen. Google and Biogen are from the same architect. And so they're going to test out the milestone approach on Google. This architect thought that, he was like, that's a very good point. I can see how everyone's just constantly spinning their wheels doing that, and he said that was something that they would think about.
Mm-hmm.
It's really no different than the way we used to
CAD.
work.
Yeah, than the way that we work in CAD.
Sure.
We wait until 100% CDs. There's some sort of in-between milestone, 50% something, or 30%, and then you have new backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
Or some big changes happen, and you say, when you finish making those changes, can you issue new backgrounds? And I think that maybe is a better way of working than the constant model updates, because that's all that people then are doing. Also mentioned that they are going to test out on Google creating a list essentially, or a list of changes, so that we as the consultants who are receiving the model aren't searching through trying to find everything that changed. So they'll have a list saying ceiling height in room 56 has moved 4 inches.
Sure.
And that can be extremely overwhelming and difficult. We don't yet know, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, I would say, it depends on the number of changes. Perhaps it's worth recommending to them, organizing them in a disciplinary fashion.
Right.
Obviously every change affects anybody, but if they were specific about for HLB, these ceiling heights changed type thing, maybe that would help. I think it's difficult to necessarily delineate between one discipline and another, but that may help as well. I think the other thing that may be worth suggesting to them is certainly looking to stagger uploads. So maybe on the first Monday of every month, architectural models are uploaded, and then the second week of every month, consultants upload theirs.
Right.
That may help people not continually play catch up and have it be a little bit more organized.
Is that the architect owns the model, and that they issue models to everybody, so that we don't issue our stuff to the architect and the engineer. So that when the engineer will only get the model with our fixtures in it once the architect and us, I guess, are finished making all of the tweaks, and we've agreed that it's ready and to go out to the engineer. Versus us uploading for everyone to see, the engineer taking it down, starting their work, and then us getting on the phone with the architect, and the architect saying this needs to change, that needs to change, and the engineer having no idea that these changes have occurred.
Yeah.
So with the staggering, it's kind of an additional level of staggering of like in CAD, when we work in CAD, we need to get our work done before the engineers can get their work done. So the architects need to get their work done before we can get our work done. So, they touch the model, then we touch the model, then the engineer touches the model. I don't know how that's going to work on Google with such a compressed time schedule, but, on a normal project, I could see that perhaps working.
Well, and I think as you had touched on earlier, it's important for everyone to recognize the increased coordination and communication effort that everybody needs to take part in for, projects to realize some success, I think, when it comes to Revit. So it's important just to keep communicating with them, and hopefully it'll all not be too stressful for you guys, but I'm sure there'll certainly be some nights where you're there rather late. I think it's inevitable, unfortunately.
I think, and then it's not a completely different side note, but the other thing that this conversation brought up is that we need to provide the principals or the people who are going after these projects with at least enough knowledge to know what to and what not to say. For instance, Gary dropped out a line about clash detection, like it was a normal service that we could do for no additional fee, and it was so easy, and it just happened as part of Revit. And we quickly jumped on that, and was like, no clash detection unless additional service. Just so that stuff like that is made clear to them, because they're not working in this on a daily basis. They don't know, does something take 5 minutes or is something going to take you a week, and we need to get some more money for this.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point. I think, Mike, I know that you and Teal had briefly talked about approaching Peter with that question. Has that happened? Has there been any update in terms of, Peter possibly providing that type of training? Or, certainly I have another idea in my mind, but I guess the first would be if that discussion had happened with Peter and if there was any timeline on that.
I think that, anything beyond the arrangements we've already set up have not really been ironed out.
Okay.
And perhaps it will take us until next Friday's call, I guess when Teal will be back. Oh, wait, she won't be back by next Friday, will she?
No.
Okay, then perhaps the following Friday, the 23rd. I think that if she could join us on the line with Peter and just be on the same phone at the same time with him and all of us, I think that would be a really good place to sort of ask these questions, because as you guys have seen, getting a response from him is sometimes tricky. The fact that he's dedicated an hour to us a week is good, and he's agreed to keep an ongoing relationship with that. So if we can get as many things to him in that time as possible, it's really our best bet of communicating with him.
Sure. So I would say that, I guess in the interim, one of the things, because I completely agree, Rob, and I've had similar conversations with both Teal and John, when they've been writing proposals, and they've, luckily asked me questions, and I've been able to hopefully sidetrack things. But I'm wondering if one of our Revit meetings is an open Q&A forum with the principal team saying, what have you been hearing when people ask about Revit? What questions in terms of, just basic proposal things are you unclear for? What can we help kind of clarify for you?
We also need proposal-specific language.
Correct, yeah.
I'm wondering if maybe there needs to be a Revit impact crossover meeting.
Well, I know Barbara and Carrie are doing that with the InDesign team on Monday, Impact and InDesign. Can't see why we wouldn't do a Revit Impact collaborative meeting.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be the crossover event of the season.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think that unfortunately, again, at least the two lead principals here in our office are out right now, so I can't make too much progress here on our end. But I think it's a good idea to approach the management team with that question of, we think it'd be beneficial to have some sort of crossover Q&A session, with the goal of addressing some of their immediate questions, and I think also, as Brandon did mention, developing some sort of standardized proposal language of here's what we can do, here's what we do for additional service, here's what we can't do, which I don't think we'd have anything that we necessarily can't do, but I think would be good to start discussing. So hopefully I'll start circulating, I guess, that amongst the management team, I think in particular when Teal returns, and because I think it is an important topic to address. Okay, so I think quickly I wanted to touch on, we do have a call scheduled tomorrow with Peter. We do have a couple topics that we want to bring up, one of which we just kind of talked about internally of kind of what does HLB need from clients on day one of Revit. So I think further educating ourselves on what we need to actively push our clients to provide for us. There was another question that Lindsay had that I wanted her to touch on quickly, which is kind of Revit versus 3ds Max, and it sounded like you had some questions that you wanted to get Peter's input
right.
on.
I know Mike and I spoke with Peter during our training, and he had mentioned that Revit's rendering capabilities are actually very similar to 3D Studio Max. And he had mentioned he had a few examples that he could show us that he had done to kind of illustrate that point. In researching it, I did find that time seems to be the biggest constraint for rendering within Revit, and that 3D Studio Max renders at a quicker speed. So that could be enough to push us towards 3D Studio Max, but I kind of wanted to understand what other pros and cons there are to each, so that we can start to make a decision about whether we want to start learning 3D Studio Max or whether we can render within Revit exclusively, at least to start, since that's what we're focusing on as of now anyway.
Okay, and I think that I had mentioned to Lindsay when she had brought this up to me, I think it's a good kind of opening question for him. I think that we likely would need to then follow up either the following week or whatever it may be about, any examples he may have, but perhaps he would have something off the cuff, for lack of a better term, that he can kind of update us with in terms of Revit versus 3ds Max. So I think that that's good. Were there any other questions that people had for tomorrow's call with Peter? All right then.
Status of our template.
Yeah, what's the status of the title block?
Okay. So just
were we are we able to, I don't know, I don't remember if we talked about this or not, but get some of those schedules and stuff that would be comparable to like our ComCheck reports, so we could look at energy usage and stuff like that?
I would say that with those, I imagine that his team isn't necessarily revising or editing those. I think that those were at a point of he wanted our input, which I think realistically we can only give when we start trying to use them. I've started trying to mess around again with Hyundai, but since we haven't really pushed on documentation, it's hard to say what's good or bad about them. So I imagine that part of it is more in our court at this point. But we can certainly bring the question up with him, especially in regards to, the title block and what the status is with that and all those things to see where it currently stands.
Also, I think that we need to learn how to change the title blocks ourselves. Because I know that another team is looking at changing the blocks, which will directly affect Revit.
Okay. And I think that it can be relatively easy. Well, I think it's easy to manipulate what they've already done, but to maybe create a new one is a little bit more difficult, because I imagine it operates just as it would a fixture family, where you can edit that family and move a line around or add a new text box or things like that. Okay. Well, I think we can certainly include those for tomorrow and at least get an initial response from Peter, and then there might be further follow-up that is required. But okay. So I guess to finally get to the overall purpose of the meeting being held here on Adobe Connect is I wanted to showcase the Hyundai project, kind of what it looks like, what we've done so far, and kind of, I think, even a question and answer for everyone as well about kind of what we've done so far. So hopefully everybody's seen the Revit screen that I have, which has our fun little logo on it. I will say that so far documentation has been zero in terms of actually putting light fixtures within the model. Similar to what I know that Robin has run into, it's a time issue, and unfortunately this week got turned upside down rather quickly with a lot of people out. So we haven't really begun putting fixtures in, but I can certainly show how we've pulled the project together and what it looks like as well. So to give a quick just overall view of the project, as I've mentioned before, it's a little unique in that it's actually being handled in two separate drawing packages. There's an interiors package as well as a core and shell. So in essence, we have two Revit models, as you can see down here on the left, that are being updated. And obviously both of those play together and create this one rather large building. The building itself, as you can see here, this is kind of an isometric view, which isn't all that cleaned up, but it's a pretty big building. I think that each of these facade elements are 300 feet long. So we have, in essence, this cube, which is 300 feet by 300 feet, and then an additional wing of the building, which I believe is about 800 feet long. So it's a rather significantly large project. In terms of the height of the building, it is, I believe, 6 floors, actually. So again, we're looking at a building that is rather large, to say the least, and certainly poses some challenges in terms of placing fixtures within the different models, what's part of package core and shell, and what's part of package interiors. So currently the way that I have things split up, and I think we've talked about this before as well, is I want to have, in essence, 3 different design sheets. This is, again, just kind of my thought process so far. The first sheet being a core and shell design package, and this would be light fixtures only, obviously, for the core and shell portion on that floor. Then having a interiors design package, so showing just fixtures as part of the interiors package. And then third, having an all-inclusive lighting design, both core and shell and interiors. I think that one of the things obviously in designing this project is that while it's carrying it in two separate packages, we want the design to be unified, so we need to know what each package is doing. In speaking with the architect, they were a little hesitant about how we were setting this up, but I think that I've got them on board, and the electrical engineer said the same thing, that in terms of organization of fixtures, we're really looking to utilize the phasing kind of designation for the project. And again, unfortunately, I haven't started placing fixtures in, but the way, as I understand it, that this works is very similar to kind of layer control that we use in CAD. So in essence, when I place a fixture in, I just need to be aware of what package I want it to be a part of and simply make sure that it's, selected appropriately in our phasing control. And then using simple filters, I should hopefully be able to organize what's part of the core and shell and what's part of the interiors. The other items that I started playing with, and actually I've already had some lessons learned for the project, which I spoke with Mike about yesterday, is that I recently ran into, on this project as well as Chapman, a rather unique error that popped up. And it was a graphical error that and I don't know, Mike, if you have any information as to why this necessarily happened, but when I loaded the models in and I clicked on the actual background, I received an error that said, what did it say? Something around the lines of unable to view, the current design or something like that. View will be closed. So in essence, it rendered the model useless to me. And with Mike's help, found out that the culprit was in this graphics mode, the use hardware acceleration. That was currently checked on. And so apparently in simply unchecking that, I now don't have the problem. So I don't know, Mike, do you have any other info on what that actually means or does?
Yeah, so the video card that you guys have in your computers have special software or drivers that, in the case of what I've loaded, enhance graphical capabilities within 3D CAD, as it turns out. Autodesk works with the vendors, NVIDIA, ATI, these are the two big guys, to develop a driver that is certified for use in CAD. Well, as it turns out, the CAD driver, and it doesn't necessarily play very well with the Revit driver, go figure. So if you were to open your 3D CAD software, you'd be able to see that you're using the hardware acceleration in 3D CAD, but because that driver is specifically CAD driven or CAD specific, it doesn't necessarily apply to other applications that use 3D. So really what it amounts to is when I built all of the computers that you guys are using, I built it with it in mind that we needed the hardware acceleration specifically for CAD. Well, maybe we need to shift gears and look more about as terms of Revit acceleration, but I just don't know that there's drivers out there that address Revit acceleration completely. So it's sort of kind of a double-edged sword here, and trying to figure out, the best possible driver while also sacrificing potential for acceleration in other applications. So that's sort of kind of where we're at.
Do you have one or the other?
I did not find, specifically for Michael's computer and specifically for the video card, I did not find a Revit-specific driver. It's not to say that one doesn't exist, but I did not find one that is certified by both by NVIDIA, the vendor, and by Autodesk. So that's one of those situations. But I don't know if we're necessarily going have any real issues with that until potentially we're doing rendering.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we might want that acceleration. So there is, when you talk about rendering, and this sort of ties in with what Lindsay was mentioning earlier about the Revit and 3D Studio Max using the same driver or graphics drivers, if you will. The driver that I have loaded on your computers is certified for 3D Studio Max. I specifically use the driver that is both AutoCAD and 3D Studio Max certified. So that being said, while it might be a little bit unclear that Revit doesn't necessarily work with the video card driver that we have loaded, if in fact we are doing rendering in 3D Studio Max, we might be able to get benefit out of it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not very clear, but I think that until we do renderings in Revit and or 3D Studio Max, we won't be able to tell if we're using really the right driver. So in other words, if you're having no issues navigating through the model without that option selected, I think we're okay where we're at.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, that's, I think, just something to be aware of. I'm just trying to find the actual error that I received. Let me show that to people real quick. So this is the error that I was getting. So it said an error has occurred while drawing the contents of this window. The window shall be closed. And as I had mentioned, that was any time that I clicked on either one of the models. So originally I thought it was a problem just with this project, but I then ran into it on the other one as well. So if you receive this display error, as I had shown just a second ago, we found that under the main kind of menu and the options and graphics interface, this guy will likely be checked. And so if we uncheck that hardware acceleration, I now have had no problems. So it's good to kind of keep in mind. The other thing that I wanted to touch on is splitting the work. So for this project in particular, I've already spoken with Lindsay in trying to kind of split the design, the documentation, so that she can, be involved as well. And so intuitively, in my mind, it made sense to split it up by level. I know that during our training, we briefly touched on kind of the work sharing side of things. And to be frank, it sounded really complicated to me. After speaking with Peter, I think it's much easier to do. And so I think that I went through and kind of sent an email outlining what it was to everybody. But I wanted to touch on it again, at least as I understand it right now, and I think that Lindsay and I will be the tester goats for whether or not this actually works pretty well. So, as I understand it, the first thing that needed to happen, and actually I've already started making this our central file, is that the work sets button that I just clicked on, if we haven't created a central file, for lack of a better term, kind of our master file, it'll pull up a screen that says, do you want to create, this master file? And in essence, in clicking OK, it then does some thinking, and this then becomes our central file that we have saved onto our server. It's then actually as simple as if we were to pretend that both Lindsay and I came into the office one day. Let me close this. And we both were anticipating that we were going to work on it. If you go and click on Open, and let me find our actual project here. If you look down here in the bottom of the open dialog box, there's a few different options. First one, audit. I don't know what that means. I'm going to be honest with you. I imagine we don't have to touch it. The second two boxes it has here for work sharing, the first says detach from central. And as I understand that in talking with Peter, that is meant to be a time where we've completed 100% design development and we want a snapshot. We want to save a copy of the model on that day. What is it? And clicking that, what that'll do is it'll create that copy, and we can then save it elsewhere and have for our records. To be honest, I don't see this as being a real benefit to our team. I think that at least the way that we operate here, we usually print PDFs of our layouts, and those are our snapshots. I anticipate that that's how we would continue. So I don't think that this is something that we're really going to be touching.
It's also useful if somebody hasn't relinquished rights and you need to start moving things.
Well, so as I understand it, that was something that you ran into on Biogen, right?
Yep.
So I don't know how it was handled if you run into that situation. I think that the biggest thing is we have to train ourselves and train the future people that'll be working within this program to not have that happen. And that means that anytime you get up from your desk, anytime you're going home for the day, anytime you're going to a meeting, whatever it may be, that you relinquish everything that you've touched and you save it back to Central. And I think it's something that we have to ingrain within ourselves. Because as I understand it, the only way to get those is to be the person that has control of them. So it's not a real great answer, unfortunately, but it's something that we need to get in the habit of doing. But at the beginning of the day, if Lindsay and I were both to be working on this project, there is this checkbox down here called Create New Local, and that's what we want to do. And in doing so, what will happen, I think I already have one, but we'll just overwrite it. What this will do is create a local file that would be, on our desktop, for instance. And this is where kind of the work sharing comes into play. And similar to what Peter had described, it then is a first come, first serve basis. So if we already have lights in the drawing, if I touch one of them, I then have control until I relinquish it. One item that he did reaffirm to me is that views are not kind of ownable. So both of us can be within the same view at the same time. It's only when we try to manipulate things that that kind of rights access becomes an issue. So that's, certainly a benefit in that we can both be exploring the model, looking at different things, and not having that be an issue. It's only when we start moving things around. So as this comes up here, it should look just like the central file does. And if you're the first person to touch everything, it really operates in the same fashion as the central file does. The only difference will be when then that second person comes on board, what kind of rights they have. And to touch on the question that Brandon had, again, whenever we are leaving our desk, walking away, going to a meeting, whatever it may be, we need to relinquish all of the things that you own, which right now I don't own any, so I don't think it's going to say anything, and synchronize with the central file. And what that'll do is it'll send all the updates that I have, save it to that central file, and it'll get rid of all of the things that I'm touching. So now, if I had left for a meeting, people should be able to continue working and touch things that I had been previously working on without it being an issue. One question I would have is I imagine that both Boston and Mike, you were involved with the scenario that people didn't relinquish those rights. Do we have any option when it's at that point?
You detach from Central and make a new Central file.
Yikes.
Steal them back.
You steal them back, basically, yeah. Start from scratch. I mean, it's not really starts from scratch, but it starts with nobody having rights.
Right.
But I imagine you would certainly lose whatever work that person had done prior to synchronizing with Central.
That person had closed out for the day. So,
But yes, if they hadn't closed out and they'd worked the entire day and then left
and never updated.
and never synced to Central or, then yes, you would lose everything that they. But you also have something to do that day and you do what you have to do.
Or you call Mike, you say, Mike, log into their computer.
Exactly.
Right.
With your children who want to be fed right now, do it now.
So wait, let me get this straight. My daughter, who's half asleep in my arms, put her down screaming so I can help you unlock a file. You betcha.
I'm glad we all have the same understanding.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm glad we're
Not
on the same
priority
page. Thank you very much.
So I guess one actually question which I don't know the answer to, but you had alluded to is it sounds like if I were to simply just close my local file and just save it locally, I still hold on to those rights.
Yeah, if you don't relinquish them, yeah.
Right. So again, and I think that everybody's probably seen it if you've looked at any other architect's Revit file, it'll say, in big bold letters, relinquish your rights, save to central, all that good stuff. Again, I think the unfortunate thing is we need to ingrain ourselves with that process.
Something needs to happen, though. I mean, it's inevitable.
Yeah, no, I think you're definitely right. It certainly will.
My bike can get hit by a van, and then
Yeah. So yeah, I think it will happen, unfortunately, but we need to try and train ourselves and really, just as with CAD stuff, every time before I'm sending it to an architect, in my head now is I purge it. It's those steps that we need to make sure that we continue to follow. But nonetheless, in going through this process, I found it much easier than I was anticipating. Not to say there won't be hiccups and things that we learn along the way, but it seemed much more of a positive for us, I think.
do you have ceilings?
I do.
So have you set up your levels and?
Yes. So we have 6 levels. So if you
I
think,
meant not levels,
Ceiling
but
levels.
your ceiling levels.
no, because a lot of that really comes in once I start,
Right.
actually
I'm
documenting.
asking because I've done the same thing. I set up my model. I have my RCP levels, but I didn't set up my ceiling levels, mostly because I don't have ceilings. But
Right. See, so yeah, for me, I mean, we do have here, for instance, this is our actual ceiling. It's a 10-foot ceiling that then slopes out to the curtain wall. So one of the things that once I do start documenting is, as I had mentioned kind of in our training, I typically, or at least what I found to be most successful, is create a reference plane that relates to level 3 at 10 feet above finished floor, lock it at that location, and that's where I start dropping lights in. So yeah, unfortunately at this point I haven't done that because I haven't gotten that far. The unfortunate thing that I found out was, and this is actually another question that I have for Peter that I need to write down, is the spot elevations that we went over as a team earlier are great, they're very helpful until you get to a higher level, because now that spot elevation says 30 feet.
Oh, because you need to take it from its you need to where are the properties.
There they are.
The relative base should be
Right?
current level. Yeah, it should be current. Can you pull that down or not?
No, it's grayed out.
That's weird.
Yeah, so I don't, because either way, that would be very helpful instead of having to draw a section every time I want to place a fixture.
No, I mean, because the other models that I've had, it's worked, except the only thing that hasn't worked is in like a double height space. But then he showed us how to adjust that, but I haven't seen this before, so that's a little
Yeah.
thorough.
So, because what I'd like to happen is obviously, to be able to say, oh, well, that one's at 10 feet. Great. I'll just put a reference line 10 feet. There we go. Oh, this one's at 15. Great. There you go. So my hope is to get that ironed out a little bit so that way we don't have to draw sections every time we want to document something, because I think that could speed up the process here for us.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to do
Yeah.
that.
Well, you can see me starting to put a fixture in.
Can I ask, since you haven't set up your ceiling levels yet,
Mhm.
did this process not take very long, what you've done so far? Because mine didn't take very long, which made me feel like I've done something wrong.
No, I mean, I think that based on what we learned in training, it is actually relatively quick. And I think one of the things that helped is the view template. And I don't know if anybody else has used this. And I know that Peter touched on it, but one of the problems I had on past projects is that I had to go through each level and I had to turn off the reference lines and I had to turn off their reference planes and I had to make everything halftone. Utilizing the view templates, you can do it once and apply it everywhere. So for instance, I think for this, what I had done is I've already gone through and said, I don't want to see the reference lines and the reference planes. And in doing so, I say, okay, and now I can highlight all of these and apply the ceiling plan to all of those. And what that does is it cleans up then all of the different levels so that they all at least look the same from that respect. So now, yeah, I see there's no reference planes, there's no reference lines. It's a much cleaner model to look at. So, Robin, I think to your point, yes, it was much faster than I've seen in the past, and I think that's because we now have a better understanding of what we're doing.
Okay. Yeah, I get it. I mean, it took me maybe an hour or two, and I was just like, I'd have to have done something drastically wrong because, but I did not set up levels. So I'm wondering if that's where that starts to become very time consuming. Ceiling levels.
Sure. Well, I mean, yeah, once you start the actual documentation, I think that it is. Certainly the first round of getting everything in there, but I would say that it's a much different world once you know what you're doing. Because literally on other projects, it's taken me days to set things up because I didn't know what I was doing. So I'm happy about the way that things have gone so far, and once we start putting things in, we'll see how happy I am at that point. But anyways, I know that we've gone. It's already 11:15, so I know we've gone over our timeline, and I don't have, I think, much more to talk about. But I did want to. Does anybody have any kind of immediate questions about how this is set up or what I did that they wanted to bring up before we kind of break away from it? Okay, then. So hopefully, I think definitely the next time that we look at this, it should have some more fixtures in it. I anticipate that Lindsay and I will have explored the work sharing side of things and hopefully have some good stories to tell and maybe even a few lessons that we'd learned along the way. But anyways, this is the beast of the project that I will be having to deal with here rather shortly. So there you have it. And I think if we look back at our agenda real quick, I think that's all that I had slated for us. So looking at our calendar, just working our way backwards, I had tentatively shown on there a couple weeks from now on the 21st on a Wednesday, having our next kind of follow-up meeting. Does anybody know off the top of their head if that's good or bad?
That does not work for us. We will be in New York at Legication.
Interesting. Okay. So is it best to push it off another week?
Or just another day that week.
Or just another day that week, yeah.
Okay, so that would be...
Thursday.
That's February.
No. Tuesday or Thursday of that same week. So either the 20th or the 22nd.
Okay. Okay. I think I can make it work. I have a GNF call at 10, but I think 11 I can make work. So I'll change that and I'll,
Which day?
to the 22nd.
Okay.
22nd at 11.
So that's 2.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll send the meeting request out. Are we needing to do another Adobe Connect at that point? Do you probably want to show an updated portion of the project, no? Or do we want to give Robin the floor to show her project at that point?
I would say that we, at least for Hyundai, probably won't. I'm on vacation for a week, and I guess I'm not confident that we'll have made enough significant progress at that point to showcase. I think we'd probably need another month to talk toward it. Robin, I don't know if you wanted to show Boston at that point, or if you think it's still far away.
How about we chat between then and now?
Okay. I would say, why don't we, for the time being, assume that it's just a standard conference call?
Sure.
And
I'll know more after my meeting. I have a meeting on the 15th. I'll
Okay.
know more then.
Okay. Very good, very good. All right, well, I'll let everybody else get back to the fun. I know that I have a lot that I need to now get to, that I'm looking forward to. So thank you again, everybody, and hopefully kind of seeing a project helps a little bit. Hopefully next time we'll have some pictures in there and can talk more to it. But I guess let me know if you have any questions, and thanks again for everybody's efforts.
Thanks.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. All right, bye-bye.